Welcome to Professional Speaking, the podcast for speakers who want to be known, booked, and paid. I know that a number of listeners out there are eagerly awaiting this particular episode that I promised to be the next episode and then stuck in another great episode with Elliot Kay about Speaker Awards. I hope some of you have indeed entered from that as well. My guest today, though, has spent 3 decades in professional comedy. She started as a writer's assistant in Los Angeles, worked her way up to a Writers Guild of America union card at 23, and went on to write for some of the biggest names in television: David Letterman, Leno, Ellen DeGeneres, and multiple major award-winning shows, including the Oscars. But here's where it gets interesting for us. She took everything she learned in those writer rooms, the brevity, the rhythm, the precision of a well-constructed thought, and turned it into a framework for speakers and leaders who want to build genuine connection with their audiences. She's a keynote speaker, an executive presentation coach, a stand-up comedian, and yes, a multi-Emmy award winner. The first I've ever had on this show for sure. Hopefully not the last. Please, let's welcome Beth Sherman to Professional Speaking.
Thank you. I like that it's also the name of the podcast, but it feels like a very formal welcome to Professional Speaking, Beth. Welcome to the second part of your career.
Yeah, I wasn't quite going for that, but I can see where that comes from. That was maybe part of the idea behind changing the name of the show when I rebranded it recently as well. One of my goals has been to bring on more people who are really sort of shining brightly in the professional speaking world. And your profile, when I keep just stands out, and there's not many people's profiles on LinkedIn and places that you sort of think, they look really cool. I really think I need to go and speak to them. But yours is definitely one of them. And it's not so much the awards and stuff like that. You actually post really cool stuff, and you have a kind of natural way of doing that. And I think some of that comes from the ease of being able to be funny and have that confidence when you come through. Can you tell us a bit about your background in comedy for anyone who might not have come across you before?
Background in comedy is pretty thorough. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do, and it's what I've been doing professionally since I was 20, and now I'm 23. I'm not. God, I'm 53. 30 years, like officially 30 years. I used to round up. But I grew up listening to comedy albums, and if you're watching a clip, you'll see some of them behind you. But I didn't listen to music growing up. I was obsessed with comedy albums. But I fell in love with the relationship between words, and these comedy albums were recorded live, and it was magical to me. And I never thought I could do that myself. It just didn't even occur to me. I didn't grow up anywhere near show business. But when I was about 15 or 16, I found out that I saw behind the scenes for a TV comedy that I liked, a sitcom called Murphy Brown. And they did a behind the scenes, and they showed this magical place called the writer's room. And that was a room full of guys. It was mostly guys at that time, about 10 guys around a conference room table, a few women in that one. And their entire job was to do what we call in the States punch up. It was one person would get assigned to write the script would come into the writer's room, and then they would go through it line by line to make it funnier. And not just funnier, but funnier in the voice of the character and in a way that deepened our understanding of the character and moved the story forward. But basically, they got paid to be funny. And genuinely, since that moment, as soon as I found out that was a job, it's the only thing I wanted to do. And so I went to university, I majored in television, which was, I would say, an enormous waste of money. But I liked the education, but I might as well have studied history or something. And then I moved to Los Angeles when I was 20 years old and worked my way up from a production assistant to a writer's assistant, and eventually started getting opportunities as a writer. And I got my first full writing job, Writers Guild of America union job, at 23. That was the Rosie O'Donnell show. I moved to New York for that one from Los Angeles. That was amazing. I was suddenly working at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, looking out wrote for Letterman, moved back to Los Angeles, wrote for Leno and The Tonight Show for years, wrote for 3 years for Ellen, and started getting into a lot of award show writing. So I've written for the Oscars a few times and the Screen Actors Guild. And along that journey, since a lot of the other people in that room were also stand-up comedians who wanted to get in off the road. They were tired of spending 300 nights a year on the road.
Yeah.
And they wanted to apply it differently. When they found out that I had this secret yearning to do stand-up, but I was a little chicken, I mean, they just literally picked me up and threw me into the deep end of the pool. And so I was already a working comedy writer, and at least I had the confidence that I knew that I could construct something.
Yeah.
And then once I did that and got my first laugh, I mean, it's addictive. So I did that steadily, professionally, concurrently for about 15 years.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely that thing of when doing very new to stand-up, I've been doing it for a few years, open mic stuff. I still a babe. But just finding out that people find the stuff that you think's funny in your head funny as well, that's something kind of amazing to me. But you already knew that before you got on the stage to some degree.
Yeah, it is humbling because there's still, and to this day, even as professionals, we know from experience, this should be funny. I mean, this makes me laugh. I am someone who has a bar that is higher than the average person, and if this sort of tickles me, I am pretty confident it'll tickle other people. But then you get on stage, and it does fine. It's just fine. But then the thing that you say that just kind of falls out of your mouth, or something that is almost filler, is something that, but there's just, for some reason, it comes from some deep part of your soul, and that gets a response. That gets a huge response. So it's still, and this certainly relates to speaking, but everything has to be tested. And I have watched the biggest comedians in the world. I mean, Jay Leno, Ellen, they go up and they say, "Is this anything?" No one has more experience. No one has more craft. And they say, anything? I mean, that literally is the word. Is it anything? I don't know. I got to see.
We still need that external check on these things, whether they're funny or not. Anyway, I'm curious were you already making jokes before you got into comedy writing? Were you doing any stuff that was like at least making your friends laugh, things like that? Or, well, was that happening?
Was I a class clown? I'm an introvert. I wanted to be invisible in school, but at home, and something I didn't appreciate until, because our experience is the only one we have nothing to compare it to. But at home, I do come from a family that had a very good sense of humor. My dad had a good sense of humor. My mom had a good sense of humor. Making people laugh was something that happened in our house. I also come from a culture that is known for its sense of humor. I'm East Coast Jewish. That's whole sort of, it's called the Borscht Belt. But it's the Mel Brooks. I mean, it's the generation that really pioneered American television. So I have that cultural experience. I mean, there are a lot of cultures that use humor as a coping mechanism. I mean, many of them, Jews, Irish. I mean, it's most cultures have some form of, if you can't laugh, you cry. So we prefer laugh.
Was any of the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel series based on your life? I'm noticing some parallels.
Well, yeah, being the only woman in the room for most of my career, that didn't change. That's starting to change now, but the hunk of my career that I did that, spent most of my career as the only woman in the room. I will say that's a show everyone wants to know if I watched it. I haven't, but it's sort of like being a doctor and someone saying, "Do you watch ER?" Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate someone's telling the story, but there's similarities, but
it's a great show, but yeah, it might be a bit close to home is all. Did you pretty much pick up the sort of joke structures and things like that from those comedy albums you were listening to when you were young, or was it something that you developed in a different way?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of listening to it. It's an ear. If my family had been into jazz or classical music, and that's what I heard 24/7, or that's what their record collection was, and I realize I'm dating myself by saying record collection. But if that's what was there, then I'm sure that I would have an ear for music, that would have affected my wiring. And also, trying to get people to find humor in things, I point them to stand-up. Consume as much as possible. Develop your ear for it. Those things, you'll never stop seeing them.
Yeah.
You'll constantly be breaking those things down, whether you realize it or not. It's useful. And I mean, you can't beat it as homework. Go watch some stand-up.
It makes a big difference. I feel very fortunate I've been able to learn from, I think, do you know Judy Carter? Wrote the New
Yeah.
Comedy Bible.
Yeah, I do.
So I've been fortunate to learn a lot from Judy. I even had a coaching session just this week working on my next set. So it's been very, very lucky, but I don't know if I could have picked all that stuff up just by watching other people doing comedy. But let me ask you, like, who are the people at the moment who you love watching for stand-up? Who are your favorites by now?
There's a guy called Jim Gaffigan who really makes me laugh. And one of the reasons I like to point people to him is because he does what is known as clean comedy. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't acknowledge the existence of sex and things that are controversial.
Right.
He just doesn't use profanity when he does it, and he doesn't sort of go for the gross out part, which now that I am in the business world, obviously I don't want to point anyone towards anything. And we live in a world that is incredibly divided and people are just looking to be offended.
Sure.
Every part of the spectrum. So I love watching him. I'm a fan of his, and I love pointing people towards him. I'm also a big fan of Wanda Sykes.
Love that.
I mean, she will rip something right to the bone. Jim Jeffries, his latest special was a bit crude for me, but
I haven't seen it yet, but I've watched a lot of his stuff. Yeah.
well, look, there's a different flavor for everyone.
Yeah.
But generally, and his past stuff, it's, to me, as a comedian, as an art form, nothing's offensive if it's funny, but it makes the bar higher. And now that is not advice for speakers. That is my own Beth opinion on comedy. Nothing's offensive if it's funny, but it makes the bar higher. So it really better deliver. That better be some chef's kiss truth that you are delivering if you are venturing that direction. What was the question?
You've answered it. It's like your favorite stand-ups at the moment. And I'm curious, before we get onto your speaking career, what did you learn about stagecraft and performance from comedy that you were able to bring with you?
Well, there's the bigger lessons. Failure isn't fatal. I mean, there's really life lessons in that if you do stand up, and as you said, you've been starting to do it, and anyone who speaks knows this, but failure isn't fatal. We learn how to fail as comedians. Sometimes the jokes don't work. Often they don't work.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's also what it is that you're trying to deliver might work. Maybe you just don't have the audience. Maybe you haven't engaged them yet. And that's the sort of thing that has informed both my work with speakers, but the larger topic that I speak about, which, and I call it rapid rapport, because that's what we do as comedians. If we don't have you, if we fail as comedians, it's not called failing. It's called dying, right? It's literally called dying on stage. Doing very well is called killing. I'm not sure why it's so violent, but
No, it's true. It's like dying or bombing. Is like those are very, very kind of violent language expressions that we use for bad performance. They say every comedian remembers the first time they bombed. What was your first experience of that?
well, it took a minute because there's that line between just not getting a reaction, not getting the room. You're just speaking you're speaking to a lot of foreheads because people are bent down just looking at their own notes, waiting to go up. So they're just not even listening. So first you have to get them to listen. And then once they listen, whether or not they like you, I think the craft is learning to pull the plane out of the nosedive, finding a way to connect with any audience. But I do have one story of that. One of the first times, so I did Vegas a few times. There's a comedy club at Harrah's. I think it's still an improv. I mean, the club is called the Improv. It is stand-up. And the way American comedy shows work mostly, it's slightly different here in the UK. But there's an opener, a feature, and a headliner. And the opener is sort of the MC or the host. You go out, you do 5 to 7 minutes. It's called taking the bullet. You basically go out there, you're the sacrificial lamb, you get everyone listening and focused, and then you bring up the next 2 acts. And I went out there, and this was a Friday late crowd, and now, again, this is counterintuitive. You would think that people are out to party on a Friday, and they're out to have a good time, and they've just paid good money, and there's a 2-drink minimum in the US. We have to convince people to drink. I went out there, and what happens in Vegas is that most people have traveled there on Friday. But somebody had the great idea to book a show. So rather than them being at the casino or the bar, they're now stuck inside a showroom.
And they don't want to be there.
And now here I am trying to get them to pay attention, while also they're looking at the menu. They're doing all sorts of other things. And
That's a
so
hard win. Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So even though you think people are out to have a good time, they're not. They'd rather be somewhere else. Saturday's different. Friday sucks. So someone decided that they were funnier than I was, which at that particular moment he'd had more to drink. Maybe he was. So I gave him the opportunity. All right. So yeah, all right. Well, why don't you go for it? This is your big moment, buddy. Come on up here. You give us a joke. So he stood up and he did a joke, and he died. He just absolutely died. And so I got to say, well, it's harder than it looks, isn't it? And I mean, the audience was behind me 175%. I mean, it was a great laugh. It was a great moment. But I looked in the back of the room, and the light for me to finish was not on. So, which meant that I still had another 7 minutes. And I could not for the life of me think of where the hell I was in my set. So I had this, imagine you're a surfer and this great wave comes towards you. And instead of paddling out and being ready to coast this wave, it just sort of hit me and knocked me down and rolled me around in the sand. Just went from the dizzying heights to, no, you're right, I suck. You were right the first time. I've never lost a crowd, won and lost a crowd so quickly.
Man, but yet you come back from these experiences. I think at the time it sucks so bad, but once you've got a bit of time and distance from it, you can start to recover yourself, and you sort of think, all right, some things went wrong. You know that you've had good sets as well. You know you can get them on side. You can make them laugh. You get back up there and do it again.
And I was so proud of myself for handling the heckler in the right way. Don't tell him to shut up. Don't do anything. I gave him a second. It worked out. Everything just lined right up. And then I learned to put a little bookmark in before you stop your set to do something. Add a bookmark in your brain.
See these people, they put these videos online now, like people handling hecklers and doing these great put downs and stuff, and it looks so easy. Some people make it look really effortless. And yeah, I know that I've never been heckled yet, but I did go on a set to perform just after someone who was getting heckled, and he was very new as well, and it completely threw him. And I think it would do the same for me as well. It's like, you don't really know until you're up there. I do think there's an element of, some people look at it and think that it's so easy, but they probably would never get up there and do it themselves or be terrified. But with a bit of Dutch courage, they're happy to shout in from the sidelines, right?
Oh, sure. And learning to handle it is part of the experience. Just like in speaking, it's just having the experience, lots of different experiences under your belt. And what's the Mike Tyson line? Mike Tyson, the boxer.
Everyone has a plan till they're punched in the face, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
and
fair enough. You moved from that into speaking, which to me seems like a natural progression, but maybe to our listener might not seem so natural. But so can you explain how that ended up happening? Like you sort of think, all right, maybe going to move away from the stand-up stage a bit now, move into keynote speaking. What caused that transition for you?
Well, really what I moved from was writing, because my full career my headline career was as a writer, a comedy writer on TV shows. So that was really what I did. The stand-up, it was nights and weekends and hiatus weeks, or when the shows were dark. So there were years and years of that. But my day job was always comedy writing and writing for TV. So what that evolved into was I started doing a lot of speech writing on the side and doing punch up for people who were giving speeches outside the world of entertainment. So it was helping people with conference speeches, CEOs. I'd help with their conference speech, and they come back, my daughter's getting married, I need a father of the bride speech. And that a lot of that started out as ghostwriting, and I realized really what these people need is, because also the big executives have a comms department, or there's usually someone drafting their speech. What they need help with is engagement. They need presentation skills. They just, and what they would say is, I don't want to be boring. And they would think they wanted jokes, but really what they needed was to be able to connect with their audience. So for probably 8 or 9 years now, closer to 8 years now, I've had a sideline doing that, doing what is basically executive presentation coaching. And most of that is through Zooms. So I just get on the Zoom with someone, and I share my screen, which is their speech, and we just go through it line by line. And it was in the course of that, as I was explaining these things to people, this is what you want, but here's how we can achieve it. And these are things that I was already doing with celebrities. And these are things but I realized that so much of what I do is instinctive, but realizing, for other people, this isn't. They're not seeing this as an opportunity. They're not seeing this line as just something that's begging for a little more truth. They're not seeing these. So, and I loved doing it. I loved it because I'm showing someone how to, one, it's taking someone from being very nervous and giving them confidence in what they're doing. And often it was for big moments. Someone's got a TED Talk. Someone's got a wedding speech. Someone's been asked to keynote at a conference, and it's because they've reached a particular part in their career. So those conversations and those explanations and that teaching is what moved me into speaking, because I realized that there was a need. There weren't, these people had never heard these things before.
Yeah.
And I was useful, and it lit me up inside. I love it.
How easy did you find it to go from kind of writing for other people in other people's voices to finding your own voice on the stage and writing for yourself? Is it simple for you, or was there some challenges?
In stand-up, that was a challenge for a minute until I could sort of figure that out, because I'd spent all of my career at that point just literally writing in other people's voices. For speaking, it was a bit of a challenge, because I never had the problem I solve. I mean, I must have, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of my 30 years of experience, I sort of have, it's sort of like being an athlete and having someone say, what are you thinking when someone throws you the ball and you run and you look that way and you look that way? I don't know. It's muscle memory. So some of it was doing a lot of Q&As with people, paying attention to what questions speakers were asking me.
Yeah. When you decided to move into speaking as more of a career, was it an intentional shift? Like, this is what I'm going to do as a career, or was it maybe like, well, let's do a bit of this and see how it goes, and maybe I'll do more of that if it goes well?
I would say a little bit of both. You sort of want proof of concept. My first stop was Maria Franzoni. I spoke with her before I had done, actually, I guess I had done one, a client asked me to speak, and I'd already done that, actually maybe once or twice. But I asked Maria, is this something that's sustainable? Is there a need for this? And also, how would you position it in the business world? Because I've never worked a second in the business world. I've always had the luxury of being, they're the creatives in that room. Just close the door behind you. So it's been interesting coming into a brand new world. But ultimately, what I've learned over the past few years is that the problems are the same.
So how did you go about getting your first stages?
Maria sent me to the PSA, the Professional Speakers Association. And that was my first stop. And the reason people in that area understood the relationship between humor and success, at least on a surface level.
Yeah.
What I've been doing is going further into it, and I'm happy to share all of those things. But they understood, at least if people are laughing, this is immediate gratification, and it can't be going too badly. So they understood the importance of that. After that, I started broadening it to more of the conference stages, things like that, more of a bit of free speaking, but free speaking in front of professional audiences,
Right.
and slowly building my own skills and slowly building video, photos, understanding how to express my value in a pitch. I mean, how can I sound as if this is relevant for this audience? How can I sort of, even just for the application, which is harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
Especially when you speak in my area. I mean, right now, if you just say AI, people go, I get it, we need it. But because so much of my credibility is wrapped around the word humor, one of the things I've been struggling with is sort of how can I make that the subtitle, not the
Right.
title.
So do you find, I'm curious about this, genuinely curious about this, because humor is a very interesting area to me, and I'm someone who's been I've been obsessed, you could say, with the sort of tools of influence and persuasion for a long time, and especially the more I got into speaking, the more I realized how intertwined those things were. I started learning more about rhetoric and things like that, and I've come to see humor as being one of the most valuable skills of influence from a stage, in terms of being able to positively lead and connect with an audience and be likable by them. It achieves so much. How do you position that in a corporate audience in terms of speaking? Is like, what do they see a need for humor, or is it positioned in a particular like learning way that they recognize they need that?
Well, I position it as rapport. It's building trust and rapport. And that what I do is I break down how comedians create pretty much instant rapport with strangers, often drunk strangers, but with strangers, let us say a skeptical audience, how we create nearly instant rapport with a skeptical audience, and how using those exact same principles, you can do the same thing in business. And really, it's about building trust quickly to smooth the process of everything that comes afterwards. I mean, in sales, it's relationship building. In leadership, it's very important to have emotional connection. People don't take action until you've built trust.
Yeah.
And trust is built by making people feel emotion. And as we've seen in politics, anger is an emotion that seems to work and seems to get people on board. But so's joy. Humor is, when I speak about it, it's positioning it as not humor for the sake of jokes. It's positioning humor as humanity. The ability to find common ground quickly, to be relatable, to grow that know, like, and trust factor. I'm not out to make more comedians. I don't need the competition. But I think everybody, until you get people to listen, it doesn't matter what you say. And that goes for speakers, for leaders, in sales. Until you have people's attention, it really doesn't matter how good it is, whatever it is you're selling, especially if it's yourself.
But I don't really want to get into some of the detail about it, but I have some questions I want to get to first. One thing is, I'm curious, do you still do any stand-up? Do you still get up there and do the comedy mics, any open mics or anything like that, just for fun or for anything else?
I haven't in a few years because the speaking has sort of scratched that itch. Not that I'm going up there with the purpose of just, let me just hit them with a bunch of jokes, but it's the same skill set.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I would call it cross training. But that said, because speaking, even on a busy week, I'm not doing this. When I did stand-up, I wanted to go up every night of the week as many times as I could, sometimes multiple times a night. So in speaking, even on a good week, I am probably going to go out and start finding some open mics just to develop some new material. I haven't done stand-up for British audiences yet. I'm American, as people can hear from my accent, but I live in London. And so I'm terrified, but I will go and do that. I seem to make them laugh on an individual basis, but at a
Which is always good. It's a good indicator. I think if you could make your friends laugh, if you can make people laugh on an individual basis, there's a good chance you can make people laugh from the stage. But I mean, I think you already know you can. I think British audiences are pretty open with stuff. I don't know. I live in Valencia in Spain, but there's an open mic scene in English here, and that's where I've been.
oh wow,
I've been doing open mics with some English audiences, yeah, sure, but some of them are Spanish, some of them are from Eastern Europe, some of them are from Nordic countries, some Americans and Canadians coming as well. And so fairly international crowds, which is interesting. But it's always interesting to me to see who's actually responds well to the humor. And I do tend to find some of the best audiences I've had have been where there've been quite a few German people in the audience. Like, they love to laugh. They really love to have a laugh.
boy, that's a sentence you don't hear every day. The
You
Germans,
wouldn't
they love
think
to
it.
laugh.
You wouldn't think it, but they absolutely do. It's these sort of preconceptions we have in our mind, but they are quite raucous. I'm very much keen to do stand up in the UK myself. So I look forward to hearing how you go, and maybe I'll try and get some leads on some places to perform when I come over there. I'm curious for you, what challenges, if any, have you experienced on your journey into keynote speaking? Have there been any things that were sort of unexpected coming up, or has it been a pretty straightforward journey for you?
Just crushing it from day one, John. Uh, um, yeah, I would say, well, two things. One was positioning, or one is positioning, and I think that's sort of universal with speakers. But like anything, it's a two-way street. We know what we're good at. We know what we can teach and share and what we want to teach and share, but getting that aligned with what people are willing to pay for or what they hear is something that they should prioritize and pay for. So, I mean, that's a lot of my move away from sort of saying, because the power of humor in business, humor is an incredibly powerful business tool.
Yeah.
But the world there's interesting stuff happening in the world now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of, so just as a priority, the word humor does not put me at the top of the list. But if it's about rapid rapport and here's how to build trust quickly in uncertain times. And by the way, the reason I am someone you should look to for this in a pitch, by the way, is because I have a tremendous amount of experience converting skeptical audiences very quickly. And I can show you these human skills and understanding that really the problem that business is dealing with is that their business needs to keep evolving very quickly, and management has to get people at all sorts of levels to buy in to making these changes. But they're struggling to get buy-in, and they're struggling to get buy-in partly because it's generational, because human skills, there is a generation that's coming up that just has had less experience with human skills. And also just it's the nature of the beast that people get promoted because of expertise, not necessarily because of people skills. So you have a lot of people who are brilliant at what they do, but getting people on board and creating connection with people is a skill that they haven't had the chance to develop as much. So when I explain things like that, it makes a lot more sense to people in business as a priority. So I would say positioning. And then the other thing that's been an interesting journey is just having the comfort to have silence on stage, in the sense of, as a comedian, we have a rhythm. And that rhythm is, my brain is set to have a laugh every so often. I mean, and there's 8 laughs a page, 10 laughs a page, whatever that is. So at the beginning, when I was explaining something, people were listening. But what my lizard brain felt was just the silence, silence, silence bad, silence bad. And that would sort of immediately erode my confidence, even though they were listening to something. I was not telling a joke. I mean, I was telling it lightly. I was sharing information in a way that's lighter, but this actual information and instruction at a lighter level has different impact and gets a more muted response than jokes told to people who are there to have a good time. So my goal is, and I'd say I'm 3/4 of the way there, it is to merge those two things and to be able to teach what I teach with the same amount of laughter or the same level of reaction.
I'm sure you would have heard that old adage in the speaker world of, do you have to be funny to be a speaker? Only if you want to get paid. But how true do you think that is? I know where I stand on that. I tend to think it's pretty important, but do you think it is essential for professional speakers to be able to at least bring some humor and maybe playfulness into their talks?
No, of course not. I actually don't. And one of the things that I think I feel pretty strongly, because when I talk about these are some of the mistakes that I see all the time, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is that they try to be funny. Now, I will clarify that because I am a comedian. Obviously, I enjoy humor. It's the try part of that sentence, that they are trying to be funny. That's not a recipe for success. Instead of trying to be funny, think about what it is that you're trying to do. It's instead of thinking of it as humor, think of it as humanity. You're trying to create an emotional connection with your audience. You want them to see you as human and a little vulnerable and relatable. You don't have to be bestie, but you want to capture their attention. You want to make them want to listen to you. That's humanity and relatability. That doesn't have to come from jokes. And the thing that I talk about quite often, and this is, here's the whole secret of comedy. Everybody, pick up your pen, but here's the whole secret of comedy. Not if you're driving. Don't write this down if you're driving and listening. It's the truth is funny. You don't have to be funny yourself. Truth is funny. All we do as comedians is observe and report truth. That's it. Life is absurd. People are bonkers. Truth is funny. So when people say, just start with a joke or just try to be funny, to me, that can come across as very inauthentic. It comes across as, I'm trying to please you. Here's something I thought of because this is going to make you laugh. And that gives people a different message. That's a very different message that you're giving to people, and that's a first impression, right? That's usually the point at which you're giving them that message.
Yeah.
So truth is funny, and I try to get people to, well, I have a framework that works also in the business context, but it works in speaking, and because we're in the business world, just loves a framework.
Oh, we do. Give us a
framework.
framework.
You love a framework. And if you like and it even has an acronym. I know you love an acronym
They're
too.
the best. Yes.
They're the best. And I wanted an acronym no one could steal. So my acronym is BETH. It's my first name. It's Beth. So the B. Now, so if you are trying to create connection, create emotional connection with your audience, with your team, whatever, these are the 4 principles that we use as comedians, and it works. So the B is for brevity. Less words, better. That's pretty much the fewer words have more impact. So overall, if you are a speaker, first of all, just look overall, write your speech, write it fat, write it with as many words as you need to, use them all if you have to. But then cut it down. Look at every thought that you have, everything you're trying to share. Take 10% out of it. Take 15% out of it. Each of those sentences, fewer words have more impact. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time, I found a niche are lawyers in the legal profession, and brevity is not a word that you hear often.
Well, not when you're paid by the hour, no.
Yeah, fewer words have more impact. In the next email you write it and then take a look at it and say, what are 10 words I can remove? I guarantee you can remove some words, and it will create connection, one, because your intent will get across more clearly, but also people will appreciate it. That they will see that you've made an effort to not waste their time. That's connection. The E is for the elephant in the room. Always acknowledge the elephant in the room. That's what we do as comedians. You don't necessarily have to go into it, but acknowledge it. If you are the first speaker and it's 7:30 in the morning and there's been some sort of welcome drinks the night before, people with just acknowledge it. Just like, wow, yeah, I see some of the people who helped me close down the bar. I'll keep my voice down.
It's so weird, Beth, because you kind of reminded me of one of my set openers, which is exactly that. It's like, I'd just like to start by addressing the elephant in the room. I prefer to be called a bear. I find elephant a bit fattest.
See, there you go.
Yes.
And in your case, you are using it for a very specific, you're using the word elephant for a very specific reason, but something I find I have to tell speakers, when you acknowledge the elephant in the room, you don't have to say, I need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. You can, if there's a reason, like you are, it's an animal joke. You're sort of, it's that juxtaposition, but some speakers do it. And again, the elephant in the room is, what it is you're acknowledging something to remove it as a potential distraction. If my arm were in a sling, I would have to acknowledge it, because otherwise people are just going to be looking at me and thinking, what happened? You're just acknowledging it, because if the inner monologue in their brain is, I wonder what happened, or good Lord, how tall is he? Or where is she from? Is she American or Canadian? Are we allowed to like her? Which country is she from? The good one or the one that's, but it's just, if they have that voice in their head, the voice they're not listening to is yours.
Right. Yeah.
So simply answer that question that's in that thought bubble above their head, and then we can all move on.
But you have to know that it's there, right? Because I know that I do hear speakers saying that sometimes they've done guys particularly done a whole performance with their flies down and a bit of their shirt sticking out. If they don't know that's the case, that's what everyone's watching. They're not listening to them. It's like, is he going to realize that his flies are undone? You're absolutely right.
Sure. Well, and that kind of brings me to the T, which is the truth is funny. That's the T in the BETH acronym. Brevity, elephant in the room. T is for truth. Truth is funny. And there are two kinds of truth in particular that work very well for humor. They lend themselves to it. The first is self-awareness, which is where the fly down, those sorts of things. If you feel like there's a weird energy in the room, you can just stop and say, there's a weird kind of energy in the room. What is it? Is my fly down? Obviously, you're hoping the answer to that question is no. But it could be, oh, someone just got a text. Everyone in the company just got a text or an email that said there's an emergency meeting that's coming up right after this, and everyone's now distracted. But we as speakers can feel that. So just ask if you have to. It's okay. The goal is connection, not perfection. How you rehearsed it in your home office, also known as the second bedroom, doesn't have to be exactly how it comes out. The goal is connection. That's what people will remember.
Yeah.
So two kinds of truth. So self-awareness. And again, self-awareness is simply acknowledging whatever your audience might be noticing or thinking. And I always try, especially the speakers, to make a distinction between being self-deprecating and being self-aware. I'm a fan of being self-aware. I'm not a fan of being self-deprecating. Being self-deprecating is simply putting yourself down for the sake of getting a laugh. You can do it. It works. But when people worry about humor potentially undermining credibility, that's the kind of thing that does it, especially if you're something that I like to call a woman or a person of color or any other minority, because we don't know the biases of the people that we're speaking to. And if there's any potential that they might think you're less than, well, you're going to make their argument for them.
No, I agree. It's 100% like there's a fine line really between not taking yourself too seriously and actually undermining your credibility. Yeah, that's an important one to find.
Yeah, and again, it is a fine line. So to have the instinct that there's this thing that you want to point out, there's not a thing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that whole subject as something to point out is off the table. But just in your wording of it, just keep that in mind and which side of the line you want to be on. It
Yeah.
can be subtle, but everything that you say transmits a message. So just be conscious of what that message is. Two kinds of truth: self-awareness and specificity. So if truth is funny, details are hilarious. It sounds counterintuitive, but there's a great quote from James Joyce, author of Ulysses, noted funny man. James Joyce. He's at the Chuckle Hut next Friday. But James Joyce, but he said, in the particular lies the universal. I think that's fantastic. In the particular lies the universal. The more personal something is to you, and the more specific it is to you, the more relatable it is to everybody else. We all have kids. We don't have your kids, but we all have kids. We don't all have your parents, but we all have parents. There are things that are universal. Look, we've all been fired in one form or another. What are the details of that? I work with a lot of speakers who speaking is their second career. Sometimes their third, but they're usually speakers because they've had a very successful career doing something else. And sometimes it's a natural evolution. Sometimes it's because they said, I ain't doing this anymore. And they've actively said that and they're leaving. Tell me more about that. If you got fired and that's your origin story, don't just tell me you got fired. Tell me what happened. How did you word it? What was your boss's reaction? These are the things I fish for. The audience doesn't need to know every single thing, but these are the sorts of things I ask on a call. What was the first thing you did? What did you put your stuff in when you walked out? What was the first thing you did when you got into your car and closed the door? Did you cry? Did you laugh? Did you call your partner? What did you do on the drive home? These are things that are small, but they add humor. They add humanity, which add humor, which gets the laughs and smiles that you're looking for in a way that's authentic to you and relatable, and you don't have to be funny. And that just, won't belabor it anymore, but the H in that Beth, BETH, brevity, elephant in the room, truth, the H is for humanity. It's it. Be human. I think humor is a love language. It's a way to say things between the lines. And the things that you're usually trying to say between the lines as a speaker are, I want you to understand this. I want to make this as easy as possible for you to understand. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I want you to see me and remember me in the best possible way.
That's great. That framework is really, really helpful. And I love that. I think this is the first time I've ever come across someone who's been able to brand their framework so personally as you have. That's quite spectacular. I bow to you. That's amazing. But that's also very memorable. It's like, well, they remember the framework. They have to remember you to remember the framework. That is so clever. I wish I had thought of something like that. But I know that you do teach these skills as well. Right? You do help other people to develop them further. And can you share a little bit about the work that you do and how people could come and work with you if they want to find out more?
Sure. Well, I have the keynoting and the masterclasses part of my business, and that's all around rapid rapport and how to build trust quickly, the way we do as comedians, using those same principles. And those I use with, it's big businesses. So it's more around that and leadership communication. What I do with speakers is it's I call it the writer's room, really, because that's what it is. 30 years of being in a writer's room, it's the most effective way possible, I know, to improve material. So I act as a sounding board. I put myself in the position of the audience and I go through their content with them. I go through, often people have a keynote that they have been working on or they have been delivering and looking at where it lags. Where is there a drop in engagement? How can we add more to this? I get sent a lot of people who are professional speakers because they're adventurers or they're athletes with lots of medals. They're very intense. This is what got them to where they are. And they are perfectionists. And so they have stories that are incredible. But what's lacking sometimes is that self-awareness, that their message on paper may say, I did this and anyone can. But there's a disconnect between getting people to really believe that, because there is an intensity that has served them well in other things. So how can they balance that with being relatable? I work in 90-minute sessions. I review everything beforehand, and then we go line by line through content. We look at the beginning, the middle, and the end, because I'm an expert. Those are the three places that talks often need the most engagement.
Yeah.
The beginning, you're setting a tone. In the middle, it can be a lighter hand, but you want to re-engage people. And at the end, that's what people remember. And in comedy, there's something called a callback. Every comedian set, watch any stand-up special, we all end with a callback, which is a reference back to, let's say, usually the biggest laugh, but in terms of speaking, it would be the moment of deepest emotional connection. But we refer back to that. And also, who doesn't want to leave on a smile, just psychologically? But I go through that, and people seem to be, so that's what my sessions look like, and people seem to be pretty pleased with them.
Who wouldn't want an award-winning comedy writer going through their tours? I certainly would be very, very tempted, very keen to book you myself, Beth. I could do with your help. For people who would like to reach out and work with you, what's going to be the best way for them to get in contact?
They can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Beth Sherman, or at the very cleverly named website, bethsherman.com. You don't get daytime Emmys. Took me ages and ages, John.
Yeah.
And I would emphasize that so much of what I do, it's not, you don't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be about humor. That's the result. The laughter and the smiles that's the result. But really what we're adding, and what I would encourage anyone to add and be aware of, it's adding humanity, vulnerability, relatability. That's what engages people. That's what gets them to listen and keeps them listening. And you don't have to be a funny person for that.
Beth, you've already been very, very generous with your time. If I can be a little cheeky, do you have like one quick tip, tool that somebody could use to like get that quick rapport when they get on stage? Like, what do you think what's the first thing you should do to win your audience over?
Smile. I mean, how's that for basic? But it's true. Smile. It lowers people's guards. Look like, and even if it's not smile, look like you want to be there. I see a lot of people who start very earnestly. And even if the people sometimes will come up and have a very dramatic first sentence or something like that, that's fine. If you're going to create tension, make sure you relieve it pretty quickly. So sometimes a lot of the adventurers, they'll start with this moment in their story where there's a lot of tension. And that's a great hook. It's a great way to do it. But if that tension is unrelenting, it needs balance. So I would say smile. Humor is seasoning, and everything needs balance.
You said it would be all downhill from the introduction, and it certainly wasn't. I think we've gone very uphill. Beth Sherman, thank you so much for coming and being my guest today. This has been a wonderful conversation. It's been an absolute delight to connect with you today.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And as you can tell, I hate talking about myself, so it's been a real struggle. Thanks.
We
Thank
soldier
you so
on.
much. Yeah.
A great episode with Beth Sherman there. And if you took nothing else away from this conversation, take the BETH Framework: Brevity, Elephant in the Room, Truth, Humanity. 4 principles that professional comedians use to convert a room full of strangers, and they work just as well from the conference stage. The thing I keep coming back to is the distinction that Beth draws between trying to be funny and being human. Most speakers reach for a joke when all they actually need is a moment of truth. There's a much lower bar and a much higher return. Now, you can find more information about Beth at bethsherman.com. I will put her LinkedIn bio in the show notes as well if you would like to go and connect with her. She's very friendly, very approachable. I do recommend it. Now, if this episode was useful to you, I would genuinely appreciate that you leave us a review on Spotify. Even if you don't actively listen on Spotify, it'll only take you a few moments to do that. Leave us a review. Make sure you're following the show. It does make a real difference to how the show gets found. Next week, though, more on the craft of professional speaking. But until then, go and do something worth talking about and keep showing up. See you next time.